The Avanc. This is a story about a terrible monster that could create rainstorms. Once upon a time, amser maith yn ôl, the land of Wales was stalked by a terrible monster called the Avanc. And the Avanc had great big claws and great big teeth, and it lived in a lake in North Wales. And when the Avanc was angry, which was often, it would flood the land below the lake, and it would create the most terrible rainstorms. And you can do this with me if you want. To begin with, the rain would start really quietly, just jump out, jump it, jump out, jump it, jump out, jump. But then, as the Avanc got angrier, the rain would get heavier and heavier and heavier and heavier until every single inch of the land was sodden and wet. And the people who lived in the valley below the lake, they were always being flooded. Their fields being flooded, their animals being swept away. But none of them could do anything about the Avanc because the Avanc was so huge and horrible and dangerous. Now in the valley, below the lake, there lived 2 children. The girl's name was Alice, and she was a farmer, and the boy's name was Gadarn, and he was a blacksmith. And Alice and Gadarn, their farms had been flooded so many times by the Avanc, and they decided they had to do something. So Gadarn went to his blacksmith's forge, and he worked there for 3 days and 3 nights until he had made the strongest, longest metal chains that anyone had ever seen. And then he and Alice took the 2 strongest cows they could find, and they journeyed to the top of the mountain, to the lake where the Avanc lived. And when they got to the lake, well, the 2 children stood there and they looked down, down, down into the green depths of the lake, and they both swallowed really hard because they knew if the Avanc came leaping out of the water, that would be the end of them. But Alice, she squared her shoulders and she did something completely unexpected. She started to sing. See, Mae'r llong yn mynd I ffwrdd. And as she did, the water of the lake started to bubble, started to boil, and out of the water came the Avanc. It heaved itself, dripping and wet, onto the bank of the lake, and Alice sang on. And the Avanc gave a great big yawn, and it went to sleep on the bank of the lake, and Alice sang on. Mae'r llong yn mynd I ffwrdd. And as she sang, Gadarn started to wrap those great big strong long metal chains around the Avanc's claws and its paws and its huge hairy head and its huge hairy tail, and Alice, she sang on. See, and then she stopped, and the Avanc opened its big golden eyes, and it gave a great big roar of fury and made to jump back into the water of the lake. But that was when Gadarn hitched the chains onto the back of the 2 very strong cows, and the cows went moo, and they started to pull the Avanc up the side of the mountain. They heaved, they pulled, they sweated, and they did this moo, which you can do as well if you want to, all the way up to the top of the mountain. And when they got to the top of the ridge, Gadarn and Alice unhooked the chains that held the Avanc in place, and they let the Avanc go rolling, bendramunigal, down the other side of the mountain and plop into the lake on that side of the ridge. And that lake is the lake below Mount Snowdon itself, and that lake is bottomless. And the Avanc went down, 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 down into the bottom of the lake. And well, people say the Avanc is still falling down into that bottomless lake. But of course, we know that even the strongest and longest metal chains don't last forever. So one day, the Avanc might come swimming back up. And that's the end of the story. Is it raining where you are today?